Hi everyone, Warwick Wood joins the show today to talk about his book, Your Move, The Girl in the Park. The story is an exciting genre-blending tale intertwining a chance chess encounter in 1973 London with the turbulent history of post-war Poland. Before we get started, here's the inside scoop on the author. Warwick Wood was born and raised in Sydney, Australia. From a very early age, he developed an interest in all things creative, and from age 5, he would spend hours drawing and making up stories. Warwick left school in year 10 to pursue a career in art. After graduating from college, he was employed as a commercial artist before joining an advertising agency where he became an art director. A decade later, he began his own graphic design and marketing agency where, apart from being the owner, he was responsible for concept and copywriting. He began writing novels in 2014. Warwick is married with 2 daughters and still lives in Sydney. You can learn more about Warwick Wood and his work at warwickwoodauthor.com. Hi, Warwick. Welcome to Inside Scoop Live.
Hi, Sherry.
Hi. Tell us about Your Move, The Girl in the Park. What is this story about, and what was your inspiration behind writing the book?
Well, I guess the overall plot, if I think of the big picture, it's about a secret, probably more than one secret. In this case, the bigger the secret, the harder it is to keep. No matter how many years go by, there's a chance it's going to come out. So the plot is driven basically by that.
Now, your book is a blend of different genres. Was this intentional from the start, or did this evolve as you were writing?
In reality, it was probably always there from the start, the idea of a mystery, historical fiction, thriller, if you want, and even romance. And the reason I do that is because it tends to give the story room to breathe. There's a lot of different elements that you can weave in that hold your interest. And it's important for me that my interest is held when I'm writing it. So I tend to like to blend a lot of those things together.
Yeah, I like that too. I think it would be hard to just fit your story into one genre because life is just not a certain genre.
Exactly. Yeah, there's a lot of mixes in there. And it's difficult when you have to, well, say, approach a publisher or whatever, and they say, what genre is it? And they give you one word, and you go, oh, that's difficult, because it
Yeah,
is more than just romance or just mystery or just historical fiction.
yeah. I can't think of any book that I've read recently that would be, just one genre. And even the names of the genres, they're branching out further and farther.
Yeah, and if you enter like book awards or any sort of literary awards these days, they quite often give you multiple sort of genres that you can enter into, which is good because it gives the book more chance.
Yes, we have an awards program and we do the same thing. And then we always give authors the option like, well, hey, if we think, your book's going to do better in this category, would you mind if we changed it?
Yeah, and
Because
that
we
makes
want
sense.
every book to do the best that it can.
Yes,
Um,
I think so too. As long as they're well written and deserve to be out there. Yes.
Right. Now, your story jumps between 1973 London and 1945 Poland. What challenges did you face weaving these two timelines together coherently?
I guess the fun part of that is that they're two separate stories. They stand alone for a long time. That you've got a story of what's happening in Poland in 1945 in the Second World War, when it was invaded by the Germans, and then you've got the story of 1973, which is some 28 years later. And obviously, they're two different, very different moods because 1973 London was sort of a swinging time and great time. 1945 Poland was completely devastating to the whole population. So those stories sort of ran parallel to each other for a while. And of course, they had to come together at the end to make sense of the whole story.
Yeah. So now, how did you write it? What did that look like? Like, did you write one story and then write the other, or did you write them intermittently as the story unfolded?
Yeah, more intermittently. I tended to write a bit about London and I'd get to a point where I thought, well, I can leave off that now and go back to Poland. And I like the sort of jumping backwards and forwards, as long as you don't overdo it. Like it's not every chapter you're suddenly backwards and forwards like a yo-yo. But I like mixing that up so that you're not reading two separate books. In reality, you're only reading one book. The stories just happen to be about different things, but they're obviously that are going to overlap.
Yeah, I think that's the part I love best about stories told in multiple timelines is just I want to know how it comes together. That keeps me going because I'm like, okay,
Yes.
I know these have to come together at some point. What is that going to look like? And then you end up with a third story, in fact.
Yes, when you pull it together at the end. And that happened in this book. I didn't know how it was going to end until I got to the end. I mean, literally probably 5 chapters out from the end, a twist happened for me in my head where I went, wow, I think I'll go down this track. And then the very last chapter was another thought. I went, oh, okay, now how to tie this up in a pretty bow, so to speak. So for me, everything's organic. I like to be entertained as I write my book, and I don't want to know exactly what's going to happen, because if I know the end, I'll tend to rush towards it rather than devote my time to the individual chapters. So I like to make almost each chapter a standalone story in some ways.
Yeah. Oh, I like that because you got to let it unfold. So I'm guessing you don't outline your story.
No, I don't. I kick the story off not knowing where it's going or what's happening. And then about 4 or 5 chapters in, I start to think, well, I need a direction. I've got to be going somewhere. And I start to do a very rough outline because now it's taking me somewhere.
Hmm.
But it's very basic. It's only a few sentences to say that this might happen, this might happen, and this might happen. And they're always flexible because as the story then unfolds, you might revise those bullet points anyway.
Yeah. Oh, I always find the actual writing process interesting, how different authors approach it.
I'm
So,
sure.
yeah, and every way is right for that author. So,
Oh, yes, you can only write in your own style and your own way of thinking. It's where your brain leads you, I guess.
yeah. So, in writing about these two timelines, there's so many differences between the two time periods, even the language, I'm sure. What kind of strategies did you use to ensure each time period felt authentic and distinct?
You do concentrate on doing that because the Peacetime London thing, which I think I previously mentioned, was a pretty much swinging time in London. And this book is set just after Bobby Fischer won the World Chess Championship. So there was a lot of interest in chess. So writing about Peacetime London, and I've been to London a number of times and know it fairly intimately. So
Mm,
that wasn't as difficult as writing about war-torn Poland because obviously I wasn't there. And I could only rely on historical novels and accounts from people who either were there and had written it down or, just as I said, actual history textbooks. So there was quite a difference there, but getting the 2 different emotions right was, for me, the most important thing. You really needed to know where you were and feel like you were a part of that. So that was quite a contrast.
yeah, yeah, I imagine. Well, probably never a dull moment for sure.
Indeed.
So, how did your historical research shape the development of your characters and the plot?
Well, I wasn't sure where the book was going until I read an eyewitness account
Hmm.
of an actual event, a tragic event actually, where 600 people disappeared from a small village in northeast Poland after the Russians had chased the Germans out. And that gave me the sort of hook for the story. So that was an eyewitness online thing that I just found through Google or whatever. The second part of the challenge is then to write the plot accurately. So I had read a large book, a very famous English historian named Anthony Beevor, who's written a massive book on the Second World War, which I've read cover to cover and went back through it for this research, particularly on the parts on Poland.
Hmm.
I couldn't do that without that detail. So taking the eyewitness account and putting it together with the historical facts is what I think, well, I was attempting to give the story credibility. And, I think it worked. At least I'm happy with it.
Yeah, yeah, that does give it that authentic feel too, because you've got
Yeah,
that live account and it's not just you, well, maybe they did it this way, or
yeah.
maybe he said this, or, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. In fact, one of the characters in the book, who is a researcher, historical researcher working at one of the universities in London, a character named Bark Hunter, professor, he was inspired by the Anthony Beevor character because he's also a professor at one of the universities in London, a visiting professor. So I just used that as a character and a way to pull bits of the story together.
Oh, yeah, yeah. I love that. Yeah. What kind of challenges did you face in addressing sensitive historical topics of like Nazi and Soviet occupations in Poland?
It wasn't so much that they're sensitive because pretty much it's all public domain now. Uh,
Hmm.
but it was really about getting the details correct. That's where so much of the research was involved, to try and track down what actually happened. Like, for example, the University of Warsaw, which buildings were damaged and which ones weren't, which ones were left standing, because obviously campuses on universities have numbers of buildings from libraries to, the main theatres and so on. So that part of it, even what it looked like, tracking down images from the Second World War,
Mm.
you know, buildings that had been knocked down, so you knew what was left standing. All entrances and things like that. Amazing bits of detail that you can track down these days. It would have been difficult in the old days. You would have been going to a library and rifling through millions of books. We still do some of that, but now a lot of it can be done online, which makes it a lot easier to write.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Was there any piece of information or of research that you found during the process that kind of surprised you?
No, I don't think so. But if anything did, it was probably just this one event that this Polish man put up online. He was, I think, probably part of the Polish, not resistance, but the Polish Home Army, which supported the government that at the time was in London when the Germans first came in. And his story really affected me. So that
Mm,
was probably the most important thing in the book for me.
okay. I'm sure there's a lot of things that you researched that didn't make the book.
But yes, you can't weave everything in, but I look very specifically because when I'm writing, when the book gets to a point where I need to paint a word picture or do something to drag you into what it must have been like to be there, you need either photographs that you can reference or you need accurate descriptions.
Mhm. Now, you mentioned Bobby Fischer earlier,
Mm.
and your title, your move, The Girl in the Park.
hmm
So, chess is obviously a big role in your story. Why did you choose this particular game as a metaphor for the broader themes in your story?
Well, curious enough, I used to play chess a lot when I was a kid, and then I played tournament chess when I was about 21, joined clubs. And I've always been fascinated by the game, but it also was a perfect metaphor for the war. I mean, it is a game of two people, black versus white, good versus evil,
Mm,
you against me in a game of chess. And as a theme, even the pieces are basically named after what originally old wars like castles or rooks were
yeah,
represented the castles, and they were like cannons sweeping along the last rank on the board. There's a lot of interesting metaphors. I mean, I didn't drag ones as obvious as that into the story, but I just saw it as also a perfect way for my characters to come together.
yeah. Tell us a little bit about Evelyn and Christina, a couple of the characters in your book and their role in the story.
Well, I guess they are my protagonists. As a male myself, writer, I always find it difficult to write from a female perspective, but I attempt to do it. I mean, I am married with two daughters, so I need, have some insight.
Yeah.
But I just like to get into the heads of the characters. And because I'm a romantic at heart, I like the idea of some sort of romance in the book or some potential connection in a romantic way. So I usually tend to have a male and a female lead
Hmm.
in the story, and I try to give them equal billing. It's written in the third person anyway, so it's not written just from Evelyn's point of view or from her point of view.
Right.
And as a third person sitting outside writing about them, I can make them whatever I want. So I just enjoyed writing their characters and developing it as the story goes along.
Yeah. Yeah. Evelyn has a fascination with Christina's white chess piece, and that becomes a pivotal element. What significance does this object hold within the context of your story?
Well, the chess piece is actually the link that brings the future, well, the now, the present, and the past together. It's
Mm.
Alfred Hitchcock used to call it a MacGuffin. He said in one of his interviews that he'd put a MacGuffin in every movie he ever made. And it's that one thing that you're not quite sure why it's there, but without it, the story can't come together.
Oh, that's a MacGuffin. I think I'm
Mm.
getting that confused with another term.
Oh, okay. Yes, it's probably been appropriated and used in other ways, but that's what Alfred
That's what it
Hitchcock called
means.
it. For him, that's what it meant, yes.
Yeah. 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 Okay. I learned something new today. So, talk a little bit about the scenery. London's parks serve as a backdrop for some key scenes. How does this setting contribute to the overall atmosphere of your story?
Well, there were two ways I could approach it. I thought about them maybe being members of a chess club or something and meeting indoors, but I like to take the story outside. So that was more interesting for me as a visual thing. And I do remember around that time in 73, just after Bobby Fischer had won this thing, globally the game had really taken off and a lot of new people were taking up chess. And a lot of it was played in parks. So you'd walk around parks, whether it was in London or in Australia, or I'm sure it happened in America because Bobby Fischer was American, where people would meet in parks, whether not just necessarily older men, who were retired, but young people. You'd quite often walk through a park and see people playing chess, at a table, which was some of those chess boards were built into the tables, and some were just people bringing their chess sets along and setting up and waiting for someone to wander by. So I liked the idea of it being outside in a park. It gave me reasons to introduce other characters to it, because if you're in the exclusive environment of a chess centre, there's no reason to walk in or meet necessarily privately, whereas in a park there's a lot of more potential for me to use in the story.
Yeah. I remember seeing some of those, the chessboards built right into the tabletop. Yeah.
Mm,
And that's kind of like a classic scene in a movie for me.
yeah,
Yeah, just
yes, it
people in the
is.
park playing chess. Yeah, I love it. So just talking to you, I can tell that your writing style is rich and descriptive and you like doing things just a little differently and I believe that helps, to paint a richer picture for the readers. Are there any techniques that you use to bring locations to life?
Well, I guess you sort of hit the nail on the head when you said word pictures, because as an artist, I also paint and draw. I want words to turn into visuals. Like I think great books that, like the Amor Towels and Gentleman in Moscow or Anthony Doerr's All the Light We Cannot See. They're books that I've read and really enjoyed. Both of those books paint fabulous word pictures. And the trick with doing that, whether metaphor, simile, whatever you want to call it, for me is not doing one that becomes a cliche where it's been done to death. So quite often I'll come to a part of a story where I want to put in a metaphor to enrich that sentence or paragraph or thought, and I might have to come back to that 10 different times. I mean, I'll just leave it there and then move on with the story and come back and think, oh, I've got a better way of saying that. Or I've
Mm,
got a better way of telling that story, because it's the uniqueness of it that makes people want to read books, because sometimes it makes you laugh out loud and other times it's an exaggeration, but it gets the point across, but without just doing it in a boring way.
right. It's not formulaic kind of.
Mm,
Yeah,
yeah.
right.
And it's that creativity that you struggle to find. I think that's one of the most complex things in writing the story. Other people might disagree and say, no, it's actually the story itself. But for me, it's about the quality of the writing.
Yeah. And like you said, the originality, it's like, wow, what
Yeah.
what hasn't been told before or done before? You talked a little bit about your two protagonists.
Mm.
Walk us through the process of developing multi-dimensional personalities for your characters. So, they're not like cardboard cutouts of each other, or how do you give each character their unique voice?
I quite often base them, in fact, I pretty much always base them on real people or people I've known. They don't necessarily have to be friends, but they might be acquaintances, they might be people I've worked with, colleagues in some way, or just people I've seen on television. But if you can think of a real person, in fact, I've even used the names, not in this particular book, but I did with one of the characters, Evelyn Copeland. I had a friend when I was at school as a kid, and his name was Copeland. So I visualized that boy as a grown man so that I could enrich the character. And the Christina lady, believe it or not, my first girlfriend, that was her name, and she was
Oh,
Polish.
oh
So I
wow.
actually stuck her in the. She probably doesn't know that. I haven't seen her in many, 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 many years. But, so I just find that a really easy way to write characters.
Yeah, that's a great idea. And you're still creating your character, but you're starting kind of with a template, if you will, and then just kind of building
Yeah.
on him. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, if I'm going to keep writing books, I might run out of girlfriends. I might have to come up with another plan.
Oh my goodness. That's another topic. Yeah.
It is, yes, yes. But let's not go there.
No, no. Now, the characters in your novel face difficult choices and moral dilemmas. Which character's journey was the most challenging for you to write?
Well, Christina's a father in London who's the Polish cultural attaché. He was easily the most difficult because he was multi-layered in that he was obviously young when the Second World War was happening, and he was older later on working in London in 1973.
Mm,
But he had to be good and bad, weak and strong in equal measure. You had to sort of like him and dislike him, and that's complicated because it's got to be credible that he can be both of those things at the same time.
hmm.
I mean, I think we can all be good and bad, make mistakes and, get things right. But in his case, those are larger than life, not the sort of problems we would normally have. So he was a complication.
Oh, and then you have your readers bouncing like, oh, I like him. Oh, no, I don't.
When I was writing about him, I sort of felt like that. I felt quite sorry for him sometimes, and other times I thought, oh, you nasty bugger.
Evelyn's journey takes him from unemployed chess enthusiast to a researcher in Poland. What inspired this particular character arc?
I sort of needed him to get to Poland, I guess is the reality. And I didn't want him to just to kick off as a researcher. I wanted him to have a background, but I needed to have him also in the park in the middle of the week. So he needed to be unemployed.
Hmm.
So he needed to have quit his job. He needed to be out there to be available every day to do stuff. And then of course, I needed to drag him somehow to Poland. And I thought the only way I can do that logically, because he was working with a newspaper, was to get him back involved in journalism in some way, and maybe as a researcher and historian. And the professor gave me another link to get us back to Poland to try and unravel some of the mystery in the novel.
Oh,
So that's sort of why I didn't have a choice. There are probably other ways of doing it, but that's the way that it occurred to me and made
yeah.
the most sense.
Wow. Yeah, you can't just all of a sudden he's in Poland and wait a minute, how'd you get
Yeah.
there? Yeah.
And why are you there?
Right. It's the middle of the war. Yeah.
Yeah.
So the concept of things not being what they seem runs throughout the story as well. Can you elaborate on how this theme kind of influenced your storytelling?
Well, I guess the idea that I wanted the book to be a mystery. I like books that to drag you right to or any sort of story, movie that drags you right to the end without knowing exactly what it's about and exactly what's going to happen in particular.
Hmm.
So it's not that I have a plan. I have that much of a plan in that I like mystery. So I let the mystery drag me along. As I said earlier, I don't want to know what's happening, and then so that I'll get a surprise, and then I'm excited to write it and even reread it when I'm editing it.
Oh yeah, yeah. I love it. Hey, you got to love your own story, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Well, yeah, and also you've got to write about something that you enjoy, whether it's chess or history in general, romance. If it's a subject that you enjoy, then you can put a lot more into it. There are books I never pick up because I'm not interested in the subject matter, and I certainly couldn't write them.
Right. So you also you bring that authenticity with you too when you write about the things you love and the things you know. So
Yes.
there is something to that write what you know motto. Yeah.
Yeah. Sure. For sure.
You also explored themes of forgiveness and closure. How about this element? Was this planned from the beginning or did it also emerge kind of organically as the story unfolded?
But that definitely happened organically. As the characters developed, I felt that they needed to give them all a proper ending, not just one person or two people, whether that ending was good or bad or whatever. I needed to tie the whole thing up at the end. Without the classic Hollywood happy ending type thing, I do like endings to be complete so that I'm
Mm.
not left wondering. I mean, I have written a book previously that leaves you wondering at the end. In this case, I didn't want to do that. I got too involved in the characters and wanted to bring them to some sort of climax at the end of it.
Yeah.
So yeah, so although it wasn't planned, it certainly turned out that way.
Okay. Yeah. I guess looking back on the writing process, what aspect of crafting your move, The Girl in the Park, surprised you the most?
Mostly, I was surprised that I got through it in terms of completing it in a holistic way, bringing the story together at the end. And when I reread it to edit it, actually, then of course it was published. When I picked up the published version of it, it looked like someone else had written it. I thought, "Wow, did I write that? Wow, that's not too bad. I can live with that." So I think that was sort of the biggest surprise for me was actually that there it is, finished, complete, and
Yeah.
and getting great reviews. So I'm really happy about that.
Yeah, that's great.
In
That's
fact, I even
great.
got another review this morning out of England with some award thing that I entered it into, and it got a fantastic review. So I'm thinking I'm probably get to the next level in that award. So
Oh,
I'll
wonderful.
keep you posted.
Yeah, wonderful. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah. So now, will you continue this story, or you said you kind of finalized all your characters'
Yes. No.
stories?
This is not one of those stories that's going to go on. There won't be a version two or the son of or whatever. It is what it is, and it's finished. I've finished another book that I'd started to write prior to this one,
Mm.
and I've now completed since. So I've now got another book ready to go, which I haven't done anything with yet because at the moment, obviously, I'm working on marketing Your Move. And also because I've finished that book, I've now got about 6,000, 7,000 words into yet another book. So, which is for the first time for me, I'm writing in the first person. I'm not sure how that's going yet, but I'm enjoying the process.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Boy, you like to stay busy and give yourself some challenges, huh?
Oh, yes, absolutely. No, I'm enjoying this process. I have only been writing for 10 years and, change of direction for me from graphic design and art to writing. I mean,
Yeah.
they're all creative pursuits, but yeah, this is a fascination. And it's a process you learn, you get better and better. I mean, every time I write something, I imagine, I hope I do better than I did the first time.
Yeah. Does it feel like it's getting easier for you?
I think so, yeah. I can write quicker than I did before. I still go back over everything. I like to craft the words as I go. I don't like to just do the whole book bang it out and then have to go back and craft it. So I can sit on a page for some time, rewrite it, every sentence until I'm convinced that that page, I'm happy with, and then I move on to the next page or
Oh,
the
okay.
next chapter.
Okay. Did you self-publish?
Through a company in Canada called Tellwell, and they've been absolutely fantastic. So it's sort of a mutual, just about every book in the world these days is self-published, for the simple reason that the big publishers only work with, even an agent won't pick someone up unless you're already known.
Right.
So you find books like, for example, not that I've read it, but I know Shades of Grey, for example, the lady who wrote that self-published it. But when enough of them are sold, that's when an agent will approach you, or potentially one of the big publishers will try and buy the rights to your book, or and move it on from a self-publishing company like Tellwell.
Mm-hmm.
I had a previous publishing company before that in London, no names mentioned, but I actually am preferring the experience with Tellwell. They've been really fantastic, very professional.
I love Tellwell. We work with them a lot, and I'm impressed with what they offer.
Yeah, no, they've been brilliant on the marketing side, and I've been helping them with it, but they've been helping me, which is more important, because there's a lot of things you don't know. You might know how to write the book, but actually get into the marketing side of publishing is quite complicated.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, well, Warwick, is there anything else you wanted to add today about your book or
I
anything
don't,
else?
no, I don't think so. I think we've covered it all. So, look, thank you very much for having me on, Sherry. It's been wonderful having a chat with you.
Yeah, you too. Thank you so much for joining me and sharing more about yourself and your work. And hopefully, we'll get a chance to touch base again.
Fantastic. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for joining me today for my interview with Warwick Wood, author of Your Move, The Girl in the Park. To learn more about Warwick Wood and his work, visit his website at warwickwoodauthor.com. And be sure to check out our other interviews at InsideScoopLive.com.